Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Mike Kollin at MikeKollin.com. Okay, so I want you to listen to this quick video right here first.
The illusion is that change takes time. The truth is, change happens the moment you decide. You don't need more time. You need a shift in being. You see, there are infinite versions of you, each living a life shaped by a different choice. Question is, which one will you tune into? One decision, one gentle pivot, and the entire path unfolds differently. Don't underestimate how powerful one moment of clarity can be. The universe responds the second you align. So, if you're wondering what to do, just listen. The version of you who already chose is calling you home.
Okay, so sorry about the music playing over that. It's a kind of a YouTube copyright thing. I couldn't find the name of that song, so I can't give any credit. So, during a training in NLP, not just NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, also Ericksonian hypnosis and timeline therapy training, one of the things that they had taught us was, for the longest time, psychologists and therapists, they couldn't figure out like what actually helps people make change. They really didn't understand what it was. And one of the statistics, this was in the 90s when I was going through these trainings, was 80% of the people that go to therapists usually get worse. Licensed professional therapists, they usually get much, much worse. They don't get better. The minute they said that in class, I wanted to raise my hand and say, yep, I'm part of that statistic, because when I started going to therapists, it went south really bad for a long time. One of the things we learned when we were studying Ericksonian hypnosis is therapists are trained and conditioned to only see wrong in you, even when there is no wrong. Like literally, if you were to scratch your right cheek twice within an hour, they will write that down as a nervous tic, a nervous disorder, possible personality disorder, etc., and they will prescribe you medication or tell you like, hey, you have this issue, when there is no issue. You just scratched your face twice within an hour. Whoopity-doo. But they mark it down in your records, and you are clinically this and clinically that, and for the rest of your life, it's on your record that you have this issue. Now, as we started to learn about hypnosis more and more, this conversation came up, and there was about 20% of the attendees were doctors. We're talking psychologists, psychiatrists, etc. And one of the things Dr. Tad James said, have you ever read the, what did he call it? Not the prescription, but the warning on the antidepressants and other medications, like, hey, this causes suicidal tendencies, this causes depression, this causes this, and you're like, wait a minute, but that's the whole reason I'm taking it. And I remember hearing that going, wow. And I remember, because I actually was on Prozac for a little while, and it did not help me. It made me way worse. Now, listen to let me say this first, though. So during the trainings, Dr. Tad James said they will literally tell you, like, hey, when you take this medication, you're gonna experience severe depression. You're going to experience anxiety issues. You're going to experience, nausea or sleeplessness or, anxiety or whatever. And I'm like, that's exactly what they said to me. And then I remember at one point reading the warning label thinking, that's probably just so rare. It's not. The warning label is telling you, like, hey, this is going to cause the very symptoms that you're using it to get away from. Now, we were talking about hypnosis, and we were really deep. We were 3 weeks into this training, 10 days into the hypnosis part of it. And now this wasn't our first training. This was the second series of 5-week trainings. And Dr. Tad James said, they literally conditioned these therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists to see everything as a disorder, even when it's not. They literally hypnotize the therapist into seeing everything as a disorder, even if it's just something normal, petting your dog, something totally normal that everyone does. A few of the therapists in the back rose their hand and they said, honestly, as you're teaching us this, you're right. That's exactly what they would. And he goes, not only did they teach it to us, they conditioned this into us year after year after year. And he said, when I go out to dinner, he goes, I see so much what's the word, dysfunction, disorder, yeah, sorry, a personality disorder. And so a multiple, they started raising their hands saying, yeah, that's what I was taught. And, after I went through my trainings and through education, etc., I just, everywhere I went, I looked at everyone like, oh, that's a disorder, that's a disorder, that's it, even when it wasn't. See, this is the rose-colored glasses. As I've used in the past, it's like you're looking through a filter, and this filter is anything normal that someone does is considered a disorder, when it's really not. But if you see things through that filter that's been conditioned into you, well, that's what you're going to see. So they said 8. So here's what happens when you study hypnosis. The person who holds the frame, meaning your belief versus their, or the way they view the world versus yours, if their frame is stronger than yours, you collapse into their frame. And so here these guys, they got their doctorate degree from these universities. Yeah, I'm a doctor. I'm right. You're wrong. It's like, this is what we were taught. This is true. And so they convince people, because this is what it is. It's a most amazing thing. Dr. Todd James, like, look, they literally condition you, convince you that, hey, this is what's wrong with you. Because before I went to these people, I was actually a pretty happy guy, and I was succeeding in this and that, and a lot of people's hands went up like, yeah, that happened to me too. And so they have this super strong frame backed by the university system and the educational system and et cetera, et cetera. That doesn't mean they're right. It just means they have a lot of people that say, well, this is what we believe and we're the professionals. And therefore, if you collapse into their frame, your beliefs suddenly shift into, yeah, there's something wrong with me. And then you become like this. I remember a friend of mine in high school. He was a normal kid. And we all got along with him. Everything was great. But his parents said, yeah, you need to go to therapy. He went downhill fast. We're talking like within 6 to 12 months, like he wasn't even the same person anymore. And we were telling him, like, hey, like, you didn't used to be this way until you went to therapy. Like, oh, no. And he was so convinced that he was messed up that he began to believe it. Now, if you remember what I taught you about beliefs go, oh, okay, that's who we are. Okay, then those are the symptoms and the way things I got to do and be, etc. So if you believe you're rich, your unconscious mind's going to create that. If you believe you're poor, your unconscious mind's going to create that. If you believe you're depressed, your unconscious mind's going to create that. Your unconscious mind doesn't care what you want. It just goes, well, what do we think? What do we believe? And you're like, well, this is what we believe. It's like, oh, okay. And then it goes in that direction. So 80% of the people got worse. Now, 10% of the people stayed the same. They didn't get better. And then the other 10% changed and got better, but they didn't know why. So the big thing literally for hundreds of years was, well, go to talk therapy and tell them all your problems. And then, now here's the funny thing. I don't know if it's funny, but psychiatry and psychologists are the #1 suicide rate profession in the world. So essentially what happened is their clients were basically putting their frame onto the therapist, and now the therapists were becoming suicidal and depressed. Not a very functional world. That was actually dysfunctional. Now I don't know what it's like now. Okay, here's what I know from the 90s. A good percentage of therapists that really wanted to help people, they were doing everything they could to read different books, look for different ways. Some of these guys were going to Buddhist monks. Some guys were going to India and learning from those people over there and their ways. So they were searching. Now, these people that were in our classes were searching, saying, hey, we've heard a lot of good stuff about NLP and timeline therapy and Ericksonian hypnosis. And they're like, they were searching for answers, which is a great thing. So 80% got worse, 10% didn't change, and then 10% did change. And so the question became, wait, why did these people change? So NLP, with their discovery and modeling people and looking and discovering how to find what's going on an unconscious level, they began to find these people and say, hey, let's sit down. I want to interview you. I want to ask you some questions. And it's called modeling. So they basically, modeling is finding out what's their values, what's their beliefs, what's the strategy, what was the strategy shift, and all these unconscious processes. So here's the thing that they realized. It wasn't about long-term talk therapy. In fact, usually it was just a quick decision or a realization. So they began to realize it didn't matter if you went to 100 sessions over 5-10 years or if you went to one session. Here's what happened. Let's say you went to 100 sessions, but on that 99th or 100th session, you went, Oh, and you had a realization, you had a new understanding, and then pop, the problem's gone. So they began to realize, like, wait, it had nothing to do with long-term therapy. It was change happens in a moment. So they began to find people who changed in 3 sessions, say, well, what happened? Say, well, what I realized was blah, 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 and boom, that was it. And so it wasn't the therapy. In other words, it wasn't like how many sessions they went to. It was finding out, how did they get to that realization? How did they get... Okay, let me speak from personal experience. I've been through a lot of different forms of therapy for a long, long time, which helped me to understand how change happens. I can personally verify whenever I went through change, okay, I could go to therapy for long, it even could be like through the NLP trainer. If they couldn't find out what was wrong and what to shift, it won't shift. One of the gifts of NLP is the art of asking questions in a certain way to pull up or pull out what's going on the unconscious level. Okay? Again, this is one of the form processes we call modeling. So the gift is finding someone who's been doing this for a long, long time, such as me. Someone who is really good at asking those questions in a very specific way to dig and to find out how to pull that out and go, okay, there it is. And the minute you find the it, you can change it. So the realization is change literally happens in a moment. One of the realizations we had is, in the way Dr. Tad James expressed it, was, look, would you take your car to a mechanic who philosophically said, well, my opinion is I can fix it, and I believe I can fix it, I hope I can fix it? Or do you want to take your car to a mechanic who says, yeah, let me figure it out, I'll take a look at it and I'll let you know? So you get a mechanic that looks at your car for an hour, even 2 hours, and push it through the diagnostics. Well, you got the one mechanic goes, well, hopefully I can fix it. I'll do my best. I don't know, but we'll give it a good, good college try. But then you got the other mechanics like, yeah, here's what's wrong. Your thermostat's off. You need to replace that, and that burned out your whatever, your coils. And then what happened is this is causing this over here, and we got to replace these 3 parts, and then we got to reset your timing and blah, 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 and then it'll be fine. Which mechanic are you going to go to? The one that charges you $125 an hour, and you come back a couple days later, it's like, yeah, I don't really know what's wrong with it, but I worked on it for 8 hours and I'm going to charge you 8 hours of labor. Or the mechanic that said, yeah, here's what's wrong. We replaced this, replaced that, we did this, we did a tune-up, we did a timing reset, we did blah, 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 and your car runs fine. Which one are you going to go to? The one who knows how to do it or the one who doesn't? The one thing I loved about NLP, it's not based on philosophy, it's not based on opinion, and it's not based on belief. And that's the one thing I noticed when I was studying psychology in college. It was all about, well, the theory, and that was another word, theory. The theory was, according to Freud, what he says is the opinion, the overall belief, and it was just, I remember sitting there, I was probably 19, 20 years old, just going opinion, theory, belief, philosophy, what? Because I came from a very, sports background, and I started out, my second sport was boxing when I was 9 years old. And I remember the first time I stepped into the ring in practice, this guy punched me right in the nose, and man, I started bleeding, and my eyes watered, and that sting, it's like it hurt like you would not believe, and you couldn't see. And now he's punching me, and I couldn't see, and I'm kind of trying to run away from this guy. And I finally cleared my eyes, and then I could see again. But I was like, holy shit! This was reality. So my coach was kind of grinning. So they stopped the practice match, and he took me out of the ring. He goes, "Now do you understand why you need to do exactly what I tell you and do it exactly the way I teach you?" I'm like, yeah. He was here because here's what I was complaining about. Well, why am I only learning how to do the jab? I've been here 2 weeks. And I remember going, Mikey, people practice that jab for 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 years. You've been here 2 weeks. He goes, are you going to learn how to master the jab? Because do you know why he beat you? Because he kept jabbing, and he beat you to the punch. And then he threw an overhand right because he had the opening, because the jab sets everything up. So he said, yeah. And he goes, here's how you do it. Elbows in, gloves turned in, hold your gloves here, and here's how you're going to do it. You pivot, you do this, you pivot your hips, your toes, your knees, ball, your shoulders. You snap it out there. He goes, you don't push it, you snap it. The point I'm trying to say was there was a very precise way to learn jab number one, because there's different types of jabs. He goes, you have to master this, and then I'll get you on to the next one. Until you're really good at this, I'm not going to teach you anything else. I'm like, okay, I get it. Because the reality of getting punched in the face, it hurt a lot. And I realized, like, I need to learn how to do this right. So all theories and philosophies and opinions and beliefs, for me, they got thrown out the window. This is reality. And this is how I approached therapy. I'm sitting here in college going, that's all I'm hearing is opinions, beliefs, and therapy. And I had been in therapy for years and it hadn't done jack shit for me. And so I'm just like, yeah, this is starting to make sense now. Like, you guys, that's all you guys talk about. I remember literally praying. I went home and I prayed, God, there's got to be something better than this. Please, God, there has to be something better. I prayed for weeks. And then Shazam, someone said, you should go to a Tony Robbins seminar. I'm like, what's that? And I called them and they sent me some stuff in the mail. I'm like, wow, this is amazing. And so I said, screw it. I'm going to take the risk. It was expensive. And I went, and holy shit, did that change my life. In a 2.5-day seminar, the Firewalk, the UPW, Ultimate Power Weekend, my life completely shifted and everyone around me saw it. And I mean everyone. And a lot of people, they didn't like it. They wanted me to be the old, depressed, sad, helpless guy. Well, I didn't come home sad, depressed, I was on fire. I was on fire. Boom. I started reading a lot. I read extra books. I was reading NLP. I was reading Tony Robbins books. I was just doing everything. I was on fire for months. And then I finally got to an NLP training, which I took out a student loan to go to. People were changing left and right because these are 5-week seminars. You get to know these people better than people you went to high school with. You have roommates for 5 weeks. You get into a group for 5 weeks. You get to know these people better than their own family members know them. And you watch them change something that they've had for 2 or 3 weeks the whole time. And boom, in one session done. Boom, 2 sessions done. And you're like, man, this is incredible stuff. So because of my background of learning what to do the right way, because this is reality, and if you don't do it right, bad things are going to happen, you're going to suffer pain. My whole reality was I want to know what works, why it works, how it works, and when it works, and with who it works, and why. I'm sitting there in my first NLP trainings, and this is literally what they're saying. Well, the reason why it didn't work with this person is because this is like this in them, but this person over here, and I'm just going, you got to be kidding me. I literally prayed, God, I want to know what works, when it works, where it works, with who, why it works with this person, why it didn't work with this person. And they're saying all this stuff. I'm like, man, this is incredible. You start learning about meta programs, these unconscious programs. Some people have this meta program, some people don't. They have the other one, or they have one in between, or they have this other one up here. And all of a sudden you're like, wow, so this person shifts this way, this person shifts that way. This person you have to communicate in this sub-language or predicate system. If you don't, it's not going to help them. But with this person, you got to communicate in this other predicate system, and then it'll work for them. And you start to understand, like, oh, I understand why this unlocks potential in this person, but not this person. This person needs to hear it, see it, feel it, and understand it in this way, and then they shift. Another thing I want to say is a lot of times you think it's going to be this huge, like, overcoming of some dramatic emotional thing that happened in your childhood, when it turns out it was just a little misunderstanding. A lot of times, I'm telling you, timeline therapy is one of the ways I learned this, like, because I'm thinking like, oh, it's going to be some big dramatic thing. No, you just, like, somebody said something, you misheard it, or you misread it, or misunderstood it, and that took you down this path of pain when you realize, like, oh God, it was this little freaking misunderstanding. It wasn't some big dramatic issue. Okay, I got a real life example. Dr. Bob Bay's daughter, he was a professor at Syracuse University, the head professor of the psychology department. He ran the psychology department. He was doing a teaching in NLP for Tony Robbins. And he said, he gave us an example of this. He goes, my daughter, Mackenzie, by the way, he gave me her number to call her, said, you guys need to talk. And I was like, okay. And it was kind of weird, but I did. And we talked a couple times. But what happened was, he said, she suddenly, out of nowhere, and it was the weirdest thing in the world, she had these massive abandonment issues. And he goes, we couldn't figure out why, because she's had never been alone. But out of nowhere, suddenly, boom, all these abandonment issues, and she would freak out if we'd walk out of the room, or we'd go out in the front yard, or like, I'm going to go to the grocery store, I'll be right back. No, and she'd freak, and we're like, what's going on here? And he was a psychologist. He was a psychotherapist. So what happened was they used a therapy. I believe it was timeline therapy. And what they did was they brought her all the way back to her first memory. And here's what happened. And this is what cleared it, by the way. So they were having a family barbecue. Everyone was in the backyard. There's tons of family members there and friends and neighbors and cousins and relatives. They had a lot. He goes, we had a lot of people at the house. And I forget what she would, I think maybe they asked her to go inside and get something in the kitchen, but I forget what it was. So for some reason, she went inside the house. So what happened was she heard some noise out front. So she went into the front, into the living room, and she looked out the living room, big windows, okay, plate glass windows or whatever. And what happened was she saw their brand new Mercedes-Benz being driven off, and she started freaking out. Now here's what that was about. I'm going to give you the much shortened version because you don't really need all of it. So essentially, the car was brand new. They had bought it like a month or 2 or 3 months before, however long it was. Could have been longer. And what happened was the car constantly broke down. I think it was 6 months actually. And so that it was in the shop more. It was a Mercedes-Benz. It was in the shop more than they got to drive it. And so eventually the Mercedes said, you know what, this car's a lemon. It's just everything gone wrong. The transmission, then it was this, then it was that. And they said, you know what, we're gonna let you return the car. He goes, and they said, we will drop a driver off to pick it up who has a set of keys, and they're gonna come pick it up for you, and then you can come down and pick out another Mercedes. And so that's what happened. So what happened was the driver drove him there, dropped him off, drove away. And as Mackenzie was getting into the front, she heard a noise. It was the guy getting into the car and driving off. But she didn't see who was in the car. She thought her family drove off and left her there and abandoned her. So she starts yelling and screaming. She ran throughout the house, yelling and screaming, yelling and screaming. And then she came into the kitchen and looked out the backyard, and everybody was out there. And boom, instantly, she stopped crying and was like, oh, okay. And she went back outside like nothing happened, and she was fine. And so that's what happened, and that set up this abandonment issue that suddenly she had from that point forward, and no one could figure out like what happened, because she didn't go outside and tell her parents like, oh, I was yelling and screaming in the house and I freaked out because the car. She didn't say anything at all. She was a little kid. I don't know, she's 7 years old or however old. But so what happened was when they took her back in timeline therapy, when she had that realization like, oh, that's right, they didn't actually abandon me. When she had that conscious realization, that part of her that freaked out healed. So suddenly this abandonment issue that she had for years and years after this was gone. It was healed. It was just a realization of, oh, that's right, they didn't actually leave me. And now everything's okay. I have personally had these realizations. Now okay, let me share one more thing about energy healing too. So when I'm working with you, I'm also working with your energy. So let's say we are doing timeline therapy or NLP. What I'm doing, I'm constantly expanding the energy. Because what happens is these traumas get concentrated, like the tip of the V, right? That I've talked about over the years. What I'm doing is expanding the energy so this concentration can loosen up and relax, and then the realization can come up. So I'm doing timeline therapy, I'm doing NLP, and I'm allowing your energy to expand open. It's literally like a zit. You know how a zit gets under the skin and it can't pop, it can't come open because the hole is basically clogged up, and it hurts, right? So what I'm doing is I'm clearing the debris, and I'm allowing the skin to relax so the pores can open up, and then it opens up, and then the fluid can come out, and now you're relaxed. It's essentially, now it's not a fluid, it's an energy thing. We're allowing the energy to expand open and relax so the issue can come up to be seen, to be heard, to be realized, and like, oh, that's all it is. With me personally, that's exactly how it happens. A lot of therapy I've done is it was just a huge realization, or sometimes a small realization that had a huge impact on the shift in my energy and in my healing. So real briefly, what I want to say right now, I'll probably make another video, is this is different. This is a shift here. There's going to be a shift coming pretty soon here. I don't know if it's, let me say this. Have you noticed this weird tension inside your solar plexus, your gut area, maybe even your heart? You're kind of like uncomfortable. There's tension. It's like you can't do anything about it. There's a shift that's happening right now, and it's going to shift, I believe, pretty soon here. Okay, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like this video, please click subscribe, click the like button, go ahead and make a comment, and you can always make a donation to support this channel. Right now would be a good time to do that. There's a PayPal button right there, or PayPal link in the description box. And there's also, you can click the three dots to the bottom right of the video. There's a little thanks, a little heart will pop up, and there's a little dollar sign. You can click on there if you want to do it that way. And you can also buy one or more of my dating relationship coaching books. That would help also. All right, guys, I'll see you in the next video. Remember, go to MikeKollin.com.